Brian France was at the forefront for NASCAR's downfall for quite some time. He was a third-generation chairman and CEO of NASCAR from 2003 to 2018. Whenever sports fans complain about Roger Goodell in the NFL or Adam Silver in the NBA, I just sit back and laugh. Because Brian France makes both of those guys look good by comparison. In today's video, we are going to examine NASCAR before, during, and after the Brian France regime. So let's get into it. Bill France Jr. took over as executive chief and CEO of NASCAR in 1972, ushering in the modern era. His time running NASCAR was overwhelmingly positive because he took NASCAR from basically a regional southern sport and turned it into a national phenomenon. He would kick this off in 1973 by convincing R.J. Reynolds to sponsor the entire sport. Thus, the Winston Cup Series was born. He was able to get CBS Sports to broadcast the first ever Daytona 500 flag-to-flag live in front of a national audience. That race was a major success, and it would eventually lead to him striking deals with ESPN in 1980, and then TNN and TBS in 1990. Fast forward to 1999, and France would do the unthinkable. He would work out a record-setting $2.4 billion television deal between Fox, NBC, and TNT. He was also able to bring NASCAR into other countries. In 1988, NASCAR ran the Goodyear NASCAR 500 over in Australia. Then from 1996 to 1997, they would run a couple races in Japan. Obviously, Bill France Jr. was a terrific CEO, but he wasn't perfect. Some of the negatives on his resume include leaving the historic North Wilkesboro Speedway in the late 90s for bigger markets such as Texas and Fontana. He also didn't put much of an emphasis on safety either, because from 1972 to 2000, 13 drivers would die. Lastly, you have the 2004 Schedule Realignment. Beginning in 2004, NASCAR would move its Labor Day date over to Auto Club Speedway, effectively replacing an annual tradition, the Southern 500 at Darlington. To make this 2 times worse, they would move the Southern 500 over to the second to final race of the year, replacing Rockingham. So we now fast forward to 2003, and the sport is in great health. At this point, it has become a cultural phenomenon and is fast approaching the NFL's TV ratings. It's the second most watched sport in America, and without a doubt, at this rate, could eventually be the most watched sport in the entire country. But on September 21st, 2003, NASCAR was changed forever.
This morning, Brian France attended the drivers' meeting for the first time as chairman and CEO of NASCAR. And after the drivers' meeting, he stopped by to spend a few minutes right here on the wagon. First of all, congratulations. You've been busier than a rookie making his first start at Bristol. A busy week for NASCAR and for yourself.
It has been. It's been exciting, and as I said earlier in the week, I'm very motivated, and we've got such a great, passionate fan base. You can feel the energy here today, and I'm just excited to do my part to make sure that we're moving forward, and I'm very excited about it.
Brian France took over as chairman and CEO of NASCAR in 2003. Believe it or not, the first changes he makes to the sport are actually quite positive. His first move was to create a new rule that drivers were no longer allowed to race back to the start-finish line when under caution. He then negotiates a brand new title sponsorship deal with Nextel Corporation. Thus, the NASCAR Nextel Cup Series is born. He introduces a brand new point system where only the top 10 can compete for a championship in the final 10 races. Now, this would be called the Chase for the Cup, and at the time, a lot of fans were pretty intrigued by this points format. You see, Brian France didn't always make bad decisions. Okay, now let's start getting into the bad decisions he made. The first of many bad decisions was the 2005 Schedule Realignment. Unlike 2004's, this one involved a lawsuit. SMI's Bruton Smith thought that his first race at Texas was popular enough to warrant another date. Pretty soon, the company was pressing NASCAR to give them another date, but NASCAR wouldn't budge. NASCAR eventually reached a settlement, and it was this. ISC sold Rockingham to SMI, who in turn gave the race to Texas. This not only cost Rockingham its Cup Series date, but left them off the schedule entirely. It was then announced that Darlington would lose its second race. In addition, Texas would gain its second Cup Series race in the Chase, moving Darlington to the spring for only one event. Lastly, NASCAR would move Fontana over to the second race of the season, replacing Rockingham. NASCAR was making moves into bigger markets, and in the short term, it actually worked. NASCAR would hit its peak in viewership in 2005. Brian France was named one of the 5 most powerful sports executives by the Sporting News that same year. Long term, this would turn out to be a horrible idea. During this time, it didn't matter where the Cup Series raced because they would always put on a show with the Gen 4 cars. Unfortunately, Brian France didn't realize this because in 2007, the sport would introduce a brand new car, the car of tomorrow. This car was heavily criticized for the way it looked and raced. Unlike the Gen 4, this car had more of an emphasis on safety. You could make the argument, however, that these same safety features could have been implemented in the Gen 4 cars and still would have raced fine. Kyle Busch's quote after winning the first Car of Tomorrow race says it all.
I'm still not a very big fan of these things. I can't stand to drive them, they suck.
During the same season as the Car of Tomorrow debut, you also had NASCAR change up its points format again. They would change the chase field from 10 to 12 drivers and also added bonus points for wins. Let's fast forward a couple of years. In 2009, NASCAR introduced a brand new drug policy in light of recent failures in the early 2000s. This would lead to the infamous story of Mayfield versus NASCAR.
We knew that somewhere down the line there, all the drivers felt like somebody was going to be the fall guy for the deal. The Richmond was, we're out there practicing and I get done that day and they come over and you need to go to the trailer. Okay, for what? Your random drug test. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. Their policy states that if you are taking something, if you get chosen for your random, call and let them know. So I got on the phone with the guy that owns the lab, Dr. Black. Jeremy's Dr. Black. Hey, Dr. Black, how you doing? Not too bad. What'd you need? Well, I'm just letting you know, you told us in Daytona if we started, got tested to let you know what we're taking, and I've started taking Adderall. And I'm just going to let you know that, let the guy know. Adderall? What's a person your age doing taking Adderall? Why would you be taking Adderall? I went, I'm stunned. I was kind of like, I said, for ADD? He said, you've been all these years and you never had it, you never took nothing for ADD. Why would you start now? I'm like, real defensive. I'm like, well, I got assessed and my doctor put me on Adderall, And he goes, well, that don't seem right. He said, a person your age should not be taking Adderall, da-da-da. I said, okay, now we got a problem. What do you mean problem? He said, it looks to me like you're trying to get stimulated for these races. I said, tell you what you need to do is get your assessment report, blah, 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 your prescription history, send it to me, fax it to me. He said, and we'll look at it and then everything will be fine. I said, well, what do you mean everything's fine? I said, so that's all we need? He said, yeah. He said, we'll do that. We'll turn your test into a negative test. Got some, you tested positive for your drug test. I said, yeah, I've been working with him. I told him that, He said, well, you're suspended indefinitely from NASCAR. Just like that.
NASCAR had said that Jeremy Mayfield tested positive for methamphetamine, but one doctor from Florida had stated that it was impossible for Mayfield to use the levels of methamphetamine NASCAR claimed he did. Otherwise, he'd be dead. Mayfield has been blackballed ever since. I recently found a quote he said during this whole ordeal, and it's going to make sense later on in the video.
Brian France out there talking about effective drug policy. It's kind of like Al Capone talking about effective law enforcement. The pot shouldn't be called the kettle black, and I think the world needs to hear that too.
Fast forward to 2012, and we have our third points format change in 9 seasons. Along with the 12 driver chase format that adds wins as bonus points, we now have what we call wild cards. The 11th and 12th place points positions can now be locked in on wins alone. At this point, can we just pick a points format and stick to it for the next decade? Probably not. 2013 would see changes to the car once again, introducing the Generation 6. This car's design was a little less bulky and was made for brand recognition. NASCAR had been lacking that for the past few years, and they wanted to go back to this specific thing. Heaven forbid you speak out against it.
I'm not going to try to be the pessimist, but it wasn't as good as I would hope. But there's a lot of room for improvement for this car. It's going to be tough. It's going to take a little while for us to get these cars driving as good as what we had the Generation 5.
Wow. He brings up a valid point. There wasn't a lead change under green in the last quarter of the race. Let's stop there, though. This isn't about the racing. It's about NASCAR trying to censor what these drivers are saying. Denny Hamlin gave his opinion. His opinion. Hey, he didn't threaten anyone or say the car was junk. He just said it was a work in progress. And for that, got fined?
There was also that whole Chase fiasco when he added Jeff Gordon as a 13th driver, which made no sense because he had nothing to do with it. He wasn't directly impacted by the whole Michael Waltrip racing scandal at Richmond. And then for some reason Truex was knocked out. I don't know. I really don't get it. Unfortunately, the racing product that has come from the Gen 6 car has not lived up to expectations. 2014 is considered without a doubt the greatest season for the Gen 6. Rather than building on this package, NASCAR decided to go with something different heading into the 2015 season, and we haven't seen this type of racing from the Gen 6 ever since. Oh, did I mention NASCAR changed its playoff format once again? The field not only expands from 12 to 16 drivers, but points don't even matter anymore. All you need now is a win and you are in the playoffs. This is now the 4th points format change in 11 seasons. What a mess. 2015 was another bad year for Brian France. He not only added group qualifying at plate tracks, but he also instigated that whole Logano versus Kenseth fiasco.
It's idiotic to be out here doing this anyway. There's no sense in being able to trying to put on some cute show for whatever the hell this is. Then you got a guy out there in desperation doing this crap like this. I mean, it's just, there's no reason to be out here. These guys have spent 6 months working on these cars, busting their ass on these cars to go out there and have some guy out of desperation do that crap. But it ain't his fault. It's not. It's NASCAR's fault for putting us out here in the middle of this crap for nothing.
I wouldn't say it's frustrating. I mean, the frustrating part is just dealing with this whole system, which makes no sense whatsoever. So it's hard to stand behind NASCAR when everybody I talk to up and down pit road doesn't understand why we're doing this. So it's maybe I need to be sat down and educated a little bit.
We got to find a better system. I mean, so much hard work goes into these cars, and then you have this roulette wheel for qualifying. It doesn't seem like it's the proper system, but hey, it is what it is, and we could be here smiling, getting belted up, going back out for the second round. But
I thought that Joey Logano made a very smart decision in what he did, because not only trying to win the race, which he said he wanted to do, and obviously he did, but the idea to late in that race to have an opportunity to put one of the top teams on the outside looking in to the next round, and Matt Kenseth has run so well. That's a smart thing to do. You got to give that team a lot of credit.
And Kenseth cleared by Logano. Maybe no. Kenseth takes him out. Logano into the wall. Caution comes out and the crowd roars.
Oh my gosh, what a mess. Kenseth would be suspended 2 races for this incident. 2016 had 2 massive issues. Number 1 was the caution clock for the Truck Series, which made no sense. I mean, this thing was coming on every 20 minutes in every Truck Series race. I don't know what NASCAR was trying to accomplish with this. And then you have Brian France publicly endorsing Donald Trump. I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, just keep your goddamn politics out of NASCAR. This actually angered the owner of the Truck Series title sponsor Camping World, who would go on to publicly denounce this endorsement. 2017 just feels like a fever dream at this point, as we now have stage racing! I'll be honest, as a hardcore fan, this has kind of grown on me, but for most of the hardcore fans, they could not be more divided on this topic. You also have the famous crash clock added to this. You are not allowed to work on your car for more than 5 minutes. If you go past the crash clock, even if your car is still good enough to finish the race, you are now out of it. Oh yeah, and then there was this awkward moment with the defending champion Martin Truex Jr. at the banquet. Just look at this, just look at the disrespect. We now have arrived to 2018, where NASCAR has not only hit record lows in ratings, but in morals. I think you know what's next.
Brian France is facing charges of aggravated driving while intoxicated and criminal possession of a controlled substance, which police say was oxycodone, following his arrest Sunday evening in the Hamptons area of New York.
Oh, the Brian France arrest. In my opinion, it's probably one of the most embarrassing things to happen to the sport in the last few decades, but there's a few problems that come out of this. So the first one is just the surface value it took away from Chase Elliott to win. You know, his first win. This story that brought all NASCAR together for a grand total of about 20 hours before this arrest was made public. It's just amazing how much bad luck NASCAR can have with PR. And that's another big issue is PR. Your CEO of a driving sport is arrested for a DUI and is intoxicated with drug use, oxycodone. The horrible look that this gives NASCAR is something that only Brian France could do. But my biggest issue with this whole thing has to be the moral issue with NASCAR. How many people knew about this? Because somebody who, more than likely, from what all of the rumors were, had been using for a very long time, how many people let him continue on like this for how long? And that's the biggest problem here, and that's where I think it brings up the most problems, is the moral issue. Because I think it is morally abhorrent that people let this go on, because there had to have been people that knew this, that were around him every day, that could see what he was doing to himself. He is an addict, or was. That, in my opinion, is the thing that's been sort of shoved under the rug by both people in NASCAR who just want to go away and don't want to talk about it, and with fans who really seem not to want to address it as much, more make it as a joke. And while you can make jokes about it, it's still something serious. That how corrupt is the sport? That is, I think, the main question that's raised out of all this. How corrupt is the sanctioning body of NASCAR?
Brian France has since been succeeded by his uncle Jim France. Under Brian France's leadership, NASCAR now looks like this. A 55% drop in television ratings since its peak in 2005. An illegitimate championship. A scorned fan base. And also, uncertainty. To put it bluntly, Brian France destroyed what his grandfather and father had built. And for that, he is viewed to me as a NASCAR bust. And once again, that'll do it for another video. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Black Flags Matter. Catch you next time.